Right, bone development and growth. This is our second to last section. So most of the bones in the body develop in the fetus by endochondral ossification or within the cartilage bone formation, right? So I know it's a tough two words here, endochondral ossification. So endochondral means within cartilage and ossification means bone formation. So endochondral ossification. When an embryo is around only 5 weeks old, a hyaline cartilage model of a future bone develops. The cartilage model grows by appositional and interstitial growth of the cartilage. It begins to transform into bone at about 8 weeks. And the following slides go into great detail on the steps of endochondral ossification. I will read them to you. But I highly recommend that you read it slowly yourself while looking at the slide, okay? Because it's a lot of words. So I'm following along and numbering based on panels from a figure in Martini's that explains endochondral ossification. So you'll see the panels below on the slide. So 1, as the cartilage model forms and enlarges, the matrix in the center of the shaft begins to calcify and the chondrocytes in the cartilage die. 2, the perichondrium differentiates into periosteum. Cells in the periosteum differentiate into osteoblasts, and then the osteoblasts form a thin layer of compact bone called a bone collar around the cartilage. 3, capillaries and osteoblasts enter the center of the cartilage. The calcified cartilage in the center of the shaft breaks down and forms a medullary cavity filled with spongy bone. The capillaries, osteoblasts, spongy bone, and the medullary cavity form the primary ossification center. 4, the medullary cavity enlarges. Osteoblasts from the primary ossification center enter the cartilage of the metaphyses and form columns of bone. 4, continued. At the same time, the cartilage in the metaphyses keeps growing outwards towards the epiphyses. Therefore, although the bony diaphysis is developing and lengthening, the epiphyses remain cartilage. While the bones are lengthening, they must also increase in diameter. Of course, you have a very thin, skinny bone. This increase in diameter occurs by a complex process called appositional bone growth. Osteoblasts build bone on the surface of the bone, and then surface blood vessels are incorporated into the bone and osteons form. This is just a little aside on what's happening. So now we're going to go back. One more word on increasing the diameter of bone. Meanwhile, osteoclasts break down the bone in the medullary cavity. So that was just an aside on how the diameter of a bone increases. Now back to the lengthening of bones. So 5. Eventually, osteoblasts and capillaries enter the center of the epiphyses. This creates a secondary ossification center filled with spongy bone. Some centers are present at birth while others develop after childhood. The timing of development of secondary ossification centers is different in different bones in different people. Okay, 6, the secondary ossification center and the diaphysis remain separated by the epiphyseal cartilage, also sometimes called an epiphyseal plate, within metaphysis. Okay, 6, continued. Osteoblasts continue to enter the epiphyseal cartilage on the diaphyseal side and replace the cartilage within bone. At the same time, chondrocytes on the epiphyseal side of the epiphyseal cartilage continue to divide. The epiphyseal cartilage continues to develop by interstitial growth. In this way, the epiphyseal cartilage remains present while the bone lengthens. Think about it. Okay. 7, as a person reaches maturity, osteoblasts enter the epiphyseal cartilage on the diaphyseal side and replace the cartilage with bone more quickly than the cartilage grows on the epiphyseal side of the epiphyseal cartilage. So over time, the cartilage is completely replaced by bone. The epiphyseal cartilage becomes an epiphyseal line, and this is called epiphyseal closure. The articular cartilages on the end of long bones are actually all that's left of the original hyaline cartilage bone model. Now here we have pictures of the right knee joint of a child and the left knee joint of an adult. And we find that after birth, bone growth continues through adolescence. Parts of the skeleton even continue to grow until around 25. So in the knee joint of a child, we see epiphyseal plates. But by the time we see the knee joint of an adult, we see epiphyseal lines because epiphyseal closure has occurred. How tall a person becomes also depends at the age at which epiphyseal closure occurs. And interestingly, in women, epiphyseal closure occurs earlier than in men. So epiphyseal closure occurs when women are around 12, and epiphyseal closure occurs later in men. Therefore, men have more time to grow, and they, on average, end up taller than women. There is another kind of bone development called intramembranous ossification. It is how some of the bones of the skull and also the clavicle are created. And in intramembranous ossification, embryonic connective tissue turns into bone rather than hyaline cartilage turning into bone. We are not going to learn about intramembranous ossification because it only occurs in some bones of the skull and in the clavicle. But if you would like, you can read what Martini has to say about it in the figure on the right. Okay, so rounding up our lecture is the regulation of bone growth and bone function. There are factors that regulate bone growth. They include nutritional factors and hormonal factors. Nutritional factors are vitamins such as vitamin D, A, and C, minerals such as calcium and phosphate, but also others, and hormones, parathyroid hormone and calcitonin, which we'll learn about in Unit 4, growth hormone, thyroxine, which is thyroid hormone, and sex hormones, which we will not learn much about in Unit 4, but the association of growth hormone is sort of intuitive, and sex hormones can be related to bone growth in what I just said about epiphyseal closure occurring at certain ages in girls versus boys, depending on their sex hormones and the age at which they reach puberty, actually. Thyroxine, we really won't learn much about. In the picture over here, we just have a little picture reminding you that there's a lot of nutritional factors that are important for bone growth. And here's a picture of how parathyroid hormone and calcitonin work, but you really don't have to learn that until we learn about the endocrine system in Unit 4. Okay, so let's learn a little bit about vitamin D, calcium, and phosphate pathways. The small intestine needs vitamin D to absorb calcium and phosphate from the diet, and calcium and phosphate are needed throughout the body and for bone mineralization and growth. Now, vitamin D may be eaten in the diet, and in this picture here, you'll see an egg and a fish showing that we can eat vitamin D in our diet. However, a very important way that we produce vitamin D in the body is as follows. A compound in the skin is acted on by ultraviolet radiation to form pre-vitamin D. This compound is further processed in the liver and the kidneys. And the active form of vitamin D increases calcium and phosphate absorption in the digestive tract and also increases bone breakdown. This increases calcium and phosphate levels in the blood. Now, you may think, but I thought vitamin D helped us build bones. Well, it does, because the calcium and phosphate that is absorbed from the intestines can also be used to mineralize bone as is needed. Just a brief word on the functions of bone. Bone supports the body. It protects the brain, the heart, the lungs, the digestive and reproductive organs, all the soft, squishy stuff inside. Bone is an attachment site for muscles. Bone helps create movement, therefore. Bone stores and releases minerals. About 98% of the 3 pounds of calcium in the body is in bones. Bone stores fat in the yellow bone marrow. Bone produces cells in bone marrow, and that includes red and white cells, and also it produces platelets. And that is the end of that.